This video is sponsored by Classic Football Shirts, the best place to get your classic and vintage football shirts. To get cheap retro Palace shirts, click the link in the description below. Hello and welcome to the Crystal Palace podcast. I'm Alfonso Greenbrook, and in today's podcast I'll be looking over the sacking of manager Frank de Boer and the appointment of Roy Hodgson as his replacement. I'll be discussing what this means for Palace over the next few games and over the course of the rest of the season. As well as this, I'm also going to bring you an exclusive interview with Roy Hodgson after his appointment. So let's begin. On Monday, it was announced that after 77 days and only 4 league games in charge, manager Frank de Boer had been sacked from his role at the club, as they released this statement. Crystal Palace Football Club have this morning parted company with Frank de Boer. We would like to thank Frank for his dedication and hard work during his time at the club. A new manager will be appointed in due course, and we wish Frank the best of luck in the future. There will be no further comment at this time. No statement was released by the club with comments from de Boer himself, but in a message on his Instagram he said, "Very disappointed about the decision, but nevertheless I would like to thank the players, staff and fans for their support. Good luck for the future." On Tuesday evening it was announced that Croydon boy Roy Hodgson had been appointed as the club's new first team manager, as they released this statement. Former England manager Roy Hodgson has been appointed as manager of Crystal Palace FC on a 2-year contract. Croydon-born Hodgson has enjoyed an illustrious managerial career spanning 5 decades and 15 clubs in 8 countries, including leading a national team of 4 countries. His managerial honours include 7 Swedish League titles, 2 Swedish Cup wins, 1 Swiss title and 1 Danish title. Hodgson's Premier League experience includes spells at Blackburn Rovers, Fulham, Liverpool and West Bromwich Albion. Speaking at the club's training ground today, he said, "This is very much the club of my boyhood, and I remember in my youth watching the club from the terraces at the Holmesdale Road end, which gave me such fond memories. In those days I had dreams of playing for the team, then as a coach you think about coaching the team, and a lot has happened in between times. It is very rewarding to find myself here now, in different times, as the Palace manager at a club that I have loved and admired with huge potential. We are the club of South London with an enormously large fan base. The ambitions here are realistic and there is enormous potential for growth, and I hope we can achieve our goals. I'm very excited to be back in club football, as it's been a long while since I've enjoyed the day-to-day sessions of training." Ray Lewington will join Hodgson as his assistant, having previously worked together at England and Fulham. Lewington is a familiar face in South London, having been Palace's assistant manager between 1994 and 2000, including 2 short spells as caretaker manager. In addition, a new first team coach will be appointed shortly. Hodgson will lead training on Wednesday and take his seat in the Sellers Park dugout on Saturday, when the Eagles take on Southampton in the Premier League at 12:30. So now I'm going to move on and give you my views on the departure of Frank de Boer and the arrival of new manager Roy Hodgson. So I'm going to start off by talking just a little bit about Frank de Boer and obviously some of the reasons why he obviously eventually got sacked. Now first off, before I go on to talk about him, I would like to echo the club's statement which you heard just a few minutes ago, and I'd like to just say that I would like to thank Frank for his dedication and hard work during his time at the club, and this is including obviously the new signings, so the hard work he did to bring in the likes of Riedewald, Fosu-Mensah, Loftus-Cheek, and obviously we now found out that actually SACKED was probably one of de Boer's signings, even though people say it was Parish's, but you know, the fact that he had that hard work to bring in these new signings, we've got to thank him for that, and also his dedication in actually giving youth a chance, the fact that he promoted the likes of Likio, Lekema, the fact that he promoted these guys to the first team, I'd like to thank him for that, because he's given our youth a chance to actually go out and prove themselves. And certainly Likio, having seen what he's been doing since he's been, you know, involved in the team since pre-season, I certainly think we've got a really talented player on our hands. Now obviously the final thing I'd like to say, obviously something which is quite similar to what was also in the club statement, and that is wishing Frank all the best. So obviously he was quite unlucky, it didn't quite work out for him at Palace, but best of luck in the future, whether you go into management again, whether you go into coaching, or whether you do go into sort of a sporting director role. I wish you the best of luck. But I've said this already, and I'll just mention it slightly again just to go over it, but I am gutted it didn't really work out for Frank de Boer. You know, we saw that on Saturday he was willing to adapt and change his tactics, and in that game it showed that we can defend well, and the fact that we can go all out attack to actually go forth and win the game. And it was unlucky for us that an error obviously caused us to lose the game, but also we were quite unlucky that, you know, at least one of the 23 chances didn't actually go into goal. So really, Frank de Boer in the game against Burnley, he actually showed a bit of progression, and the fact that he was slowly adapting to the Premier League by adapting his own sort of tactics and sort of the way he sets the team out to play. And I've said this already, and I've said this in every single podcast this season, if it wasn't for the individual mistakes in every games so far this season, then for sure we'll have at least 3 or 4, maybe even 5, 6 points on the board. Because, you know, say the game against Liverpool, if we took our chances and we didn't make the mistake towards the end of the game, we probably could have won that game. You know, the game against Swansea in the second half, when we went out, you know, towards the end of the second half, we could have gone on to at least get a draw from that game. If we didn't make the errors, we wouldn't have lost the Swansea game, because Swansea wouldn't have scored their 2 goals. You know, the same can go to the Burnley game on Sunday. You know, if Lee Chun-Yong didn't make that mistake, De Boer, you know, he probably would have still been in the job, because he would have had a draw and at least had some points, you know, on the board. And despite obviously the results, the fact that we've lost 4 consecutive games, it's still quite early on, so there's still, you know, out of the 4 games, there's still 38 to go. So there was still time for him to get his system to work. There was still enough time for him to, you know, finally get the players to adapt to his system. But really, you know, the board, you know, Steve Parish and co have decided that actually we're not going to chance it. We're going to make sure we can get someone in with a little bit more experience in the Premier League. And obviously they've gone forth and done that by bringing in Roy Hodgson. But like I've said already, I do wish Frank de Boer all the best, because I can't quite say this enough. You know, I'm gutted that it didn't work out for him, because he showed in glimpses of games, and especially in pre-season, that actually he might have the skills to be a Premier League manager. But ultimately, what the last sort of 4 games have showed us, that actually he maybe isn't quite up there. And I think it's purely because he hasn't quite been given enough time, obviously, to adapt to the Premier League. Now, there are quite a lot of stories going about in the media about how Frank de Boer treated the likes of, you know, Joe Ward, Martin Kelly, Damien Delaney, Jaro Riedewald. And, you know, if it is true that obviously Frank de Boer has mistreated these players and sort of told them quite bluntly that they're not good enough, rather than trying to help them and develop them, if that is true, then I'm sure Hodgson, being such a good manager that he is, having seen how well we've done at Fulham and West Brom, then I'm sure that, you know, Hodgson can help to rebuild the likes of Ward and Kelly's confidence, because we've seen with Ward and Kelly that in seasons gone by, especially the end of last season, that actually, you know, they may not be the best players in the Palace team, but they still can put a shift and they've still got some quality. So hopefully Hodgson can, you know, rebuild their confidence back up again. Now, obviously, one of the main media reports that actually came out was in a report from the BBC, and journalist David Orstein, I believe his name is. I'm not sure how you pronounce it, but David Orstein, you can find him on Twitter. He actually, you know, obviously got some information, wrote a nice article on Twitter about obviously the reasons why De Boer got sacked. Now, I'm going to read them out in a minute, but do comment below with whether you do agree with the reasons I'm about to obviously read out. And these are direct quotes from obviously David's article he wrote for the BBC. De Boer met with Palace chairman Steve Parish and sporting director Dougie Freedman on Monday the 28th of August. Parish and Freedman left that meeting very underwhelmed and with no confidence that the Dutchman was the right man to turn Palace's fortunes around. They made contact with Roy Hodgson and other potential replacements about their availability that week, but the club's transfer focuses turned to player recruitment and at the end of the transfer window. De Boer was expected to be sacked before Sunday's trip to Burnley and although that didn't materialise, there were still signs of encouragement despite Palace's 1-0 defeat. It was largely irrelevant because of the hierarchy. Parish, his American owners, co-owners and Friedman were in the director's box at Turf Moor, and a decision had all but been made. Among the reasons for Palace's dissatisfaction were De Boer's apparent diversion from a number of agreements reached when he signed, such as the team's formation, the squad struggles to adapt to the new style he tried to implement poorly, poor feedback on training methods, sessions and an atmosphere at the training ground, his use of relationships with certain players such as Damien Delaney, Martin Kelly, Joe Ward, Jaro Riedewald and Lee Chung-yong, and a persistent lack of input on transfer activity. De Boer, meanwhile, is understood to have been deeply unhappy with the factors including the pre-season schedule organised before his arrival, the involvement of Parish in first-team matters, and the delay in signing Mamadou Sakho. So obviously, if you do agree with any of these points, like I said before I read the article by David from the BBC, then do drop a comment below in the YouTube comments with your views and whether you do agree with these articles about the things which possibly could have gone wrong behind the scenes for De Boer. And obviously that includes his relationship with the board and especially Steve Parish. Now obviously if any of these points are true, so the fact that he fell out with players, the fact that the board didn't have confidence in him, the fact that his training methods weren't quite good enough, the fact that he actually broke an agreement about the formation, if that is true, then De Boer definitely had to go, because his relationship with obviously the board and Steve Parish and co, the fact that he fell out with certain players, the fact that that was damaged means that it's gone too far now, and before the relationship gets worse, then you have to get rid of him. And obviously we did start to see signs. I don't necessarily think he was losing the dressing room, but there were signs that certain players obviously weren't happy with what he was doing, and obviously they went to speak to Steve Parish, and it's rumoured that about 4, maybe 5 senior players actually went to Steve Parish and said, right Steve, it isn't quite working out with De Boer, his training methods are not quite good enough, and obviously that probably prompted the board, including Steve Parish and the American owners, to obviously looking at the results and hearing that from players, that actually maybe it is time to make a loss on the signing of Frank de Boer. Now obviously if these problems were all occurring at the same time, you know, behind the scenes, all these problems with training and transfers and agreements, then of course a change is definitely needed, and I'm sure that many of you will agree. We should have given De Boer more time. We should have given him more time to adapt to the Premier League, and you know, like we saw at Burnley, it was an improvement, and hopefully we could build on that. But unluckily for us, I say it's unluckily for us, maybe I'll be proved wrong and say that actually Roy Hodgson does a fantastic job, but unluckily for us and obviously for Frank de Boer, you know, the Palace-De Boer relationship didn't quite work out, and obviously that's resulted in him being sacked. But do comment below with your thoughts on De Boer sacking, whether you think he should have been given more time, whether you think he shouldn't have been employed in the first place, or whether you think maybe he should have been sacked a few games ago. Now obviously the man that's gone on to replace Frank de Boer is obviously Croydon-born Roy Hodgson, and obviously, hopefully, and like I've said already, unluckily for us, I think it didn't work out for De Boer, because I thought he could have been a really good manager for us if given the time and the resources, but it didn't work out. But hopefully Roy Hodgson is that man who can help Palace to kick on this season, and obviously so we can start travelling up the league away from relegation. Now he may not be the most exciting appointment, and I certainly do echo that I don't think he's necessarily a really exciting manager who's going to do wonders for the club, and considering he's 70 years old, it is sort of a short-term fix. But I personally think he is someone who cares about the club, considering he's been a fan all his life. He used to stand in the Homesdale. The fact that he's always been following Palace throughout his career, the fact that he's got that, and the fact that he cares about the club is a really great thing. And also, unlike De Boer, he actually has got experience managing teams, not only in the Premier League, but teams in the Premier League that are at a similar sort of status as us. So the fact that Fulham almost got relegated and he came in and saved them, he done really well. He got respectable mid-table finishes with West Brom in the Premier League. So he's got that experience managing teams that are at our sort of level. You saw mid-table teams fighting for relegation. He's managed teams at that level and done really well. Now really, you know, I say I feel good about the appointment. I don't feel great. I don't think it's the greatest appointment, but I feel good about it. I think that, you know, maybe this will be the perfect job for Hodgson. You know, his career is coming to an end, so it's coming full circle. So he started his youth career at Palace, he's ending it managing his, you know, his boyhood club. So hopefully it's a perfect job for Roy Hodgson to end his career. It won't really, you know, affect his reputation. I think it might improve it, considering how bad or how things went with England. But hopefully, you know, he can help to build a legacy with Palace. You know, hopefully he stays, you know, he ends his career on a high. That's the main thing really for me. You know, that's the two main things about his appointment. The fact that his career's gone full circle, so he's gone from being, you know, starting at Palace, gone full circle, managed in loads of different leagues, loads of different national teams. He's come back to his boyhood club, so hopefully now he can leave a legacy, do really well for his boyhood club, and obviously, you know, end his career on a high. Now obviously, you know, there are downsides to this appointment, the fact that he didn't do well at England. But if you look back at his managerial career before England, including clubs like Arsenal, like I said already, Fulham or West Brom, you know, he'd done actually quite well, and you could say quite a, sort of almost like an Allardyce-esque manager. Doesn't do fantastic things, but he does a job in the Premier League, and that's what we've got to do now. We've got to get behind him because he's shown before that he can do a job. So we've now got to allow him to go forth and obviously do the job. And if you look back at his time at Fulham, yes, he saved them from relegation, but he also took them to the Europa League final. So I'm not saying we're going to get Europa League, but the fact that he was able to develop the club in Fulham to get to that next level, hopefully that sort of experience with both Fulham and West Brom can help us to, you know, go forward this season. Now, obviously, looking across social media when this was announced, I saw quite a lot of debate about his form, sort of his system, his formation he would use, whether he's sort of suits Palace's style. And I personally think he may not be the best. We may not play the best football, but his sort of style, so that's sitting deep, absorbing the attacks from the opposition and counter-attacking, I think that will not only suit the club, but also suit the players at the club. And given how well we played last season under Sam Allardyce by sitting deep and hitting teams on the counter-attack, I'm sure that actually this new style will probably suit the players. And if you look back at his interview, which I'll show you or you'll listen to in a few minutes time, you do hear him talk about the front three of Benteke, Zaha and Townsend. So that sort of gives a hint away to the fact that he's probably going to be playing a 4-3-3 formation, something which he did use quite often with England. Now, I don't necessarily think there's anything wrong with this sort of route one football, the fact that you put balls into the box, you make sure the striker can head them, and that's all you do, long ball football. I have no problem with it as long as it gets results, and he's shown with Fulham and with West Brom that actually it does work. And if you look back at his record, you know, he may not have done well at the Euros with England, obviously getting knocked out by Iceland 2-1, but looking back at his record, he doesn't do well with, you know, teams with big expectations. So the likes of England and Liverpool, they had massive expectations, massive following, and obviously he didn't do quite well there. But like I said, clubs like ours, like West Brom, like the likes of Fulham, there isn't that much expectation, so he does better there because there's not, people don't expect too much from him. And I certainly think, you know, I'm not going to judge him on his time at England. I'm going to look back and actually say he did actually finish the Euro qualifications with an 100% record, and obviously that means he can't be that bad. And you know, he can't be that bad if he won 100% of his games in the qualifiers. Yes, he went on to, you know, lose against Iceland, which is a national embarrassment in my opinion. Yes, he went on to lose to them in the, was it this quarterfinals, or maybe it was this round of 16, whatever it was in the Euros. Yes, we did lose to them, but I think you can't really you have to look past that, because the fact that he won the qualifiers playing some good quality teams, you know, in some of the qualifiers, the fact that he came away with a 100% win record means he can't be that bad, because with the players of England's quality, England never seem to perform. So you can understand them not doing well at the Euros, because England never do perform well. So maybe it's just the England curse, but I think we've got to look sort of ahead and look past just what he's done with England, because I personally think, hopefully I'm proved right, that actually with this sort of counter-attacking style, he's actually a really, really good manager. But obviously, before I go on, like I said already, and give you his first interview as a Palace manager, I'm now going to give you 5 things I think that Roy Hodgson needs to sort out immediately at Crystal Palace after being appointed manager. So the first one is quite simple: get Palace scoring goals. The second one is make a decision over Jason Puncheon, so that is whether to change his position in the team or drop him to the bench, and obviously that can also include whether to keep him as captain. My third bullet point is decide on a back four and stick to it. So unlike what Frank de Boer did, no experimenting with the team. He needs to go back to basics and get the team to defend well again. Number 4 is create a closer bond between the club and the fans. So rebuilding that relationship, which has sort of gone down in the last few weeks. And then number 5, which is one that's quite debatable, but I think is a really good point, is decide what to do with Jaro Riedewald. And obviously this has been quite a lot of talking points on social media, people saying he might go back to Ajax because Frank de Boer's left now. And I personally think, you know, Hodgson has got to decide, do you start his Palace career again and, you know, play him at centre-back, left-back or CDM, you know, bring him into the team and utilise that quality? Or do you sell, or do you be the, you know, he'll be the first player to sell in January because he doesn't quite fit into English football, and maybe he'll go back to Ajax or another team in the Netherlands where he'd done well. But all of these points, I think they're really key things that Hodgson needs to get right. You know, the fact that we need to get scoring goals again, something which he'd done in the qualifiers with England really well. Make a decision over Puncheon, whether he's going to play him, drop him, whether he's going to keep him as captain. Obviously, decide on the back four. I think it's quite obvious that he's going to be playing with a back four, considering all of his other managerial jobs. Obviously, build that bond between the club and the fans, and also I think to rebuild that bond, Steve Parish has got to come out in support for the new manager, and also he needs to sort of get involved a little bit more with the fans and reassure the fans that everything at their club, the relationship is good enough. And then obviously, like I've already mentioned, is Jaro Riedewald. You know, I think he needs to really utilise his quality, because we saw against Burnley the quality Riedewald's got. So hopefully, with a new manager like Roy Hodgson, he can get the best out of him. So finally, before I go on to end this podcast, you know, I can't be helped but be impressed by Hodgson's enthusiasm for the job. And that leads me nicely onto his first exclusive interview as Palace manager.
Welcome back to Crystal Palace Football Club, place where it all started for you.
Yeah, well, it certainly started on the terraces, that's for sure. It's very much the club of my boyhood and my youth, and the Holmesdale Road End, which of course was terracing in those days. Now it's a lovely stand. But I have such fond memories of it, and it's really nice to be back.
Did you always think or hope that one day you'd end up managing here?
Well, certainly when I was on the terraces there, I had dreams of playing for the team, and I suppose when I became a coach later on, coaching the team. But a lot's happened in between times, but it's in some ways very rewarding to find myself here now at a difficult time, of course, but at a club that I've always loved and admired, and a club which I think has got huge potential and represents so many people. You know, we are the South London club, and we have an enormously large fan base.
And what excites you about this challenge here with Palace? I
think the attitude of the owners, the attitude of the players, especially if I go on the performance from Sunday against Burnley. I think that people here, I believe, I'll have to be proven wrong, are down to earth with their feet on the ground. They know what being a Premiership club is. They know how hard it is to remain a Premiership club, and they know how hard they have to work and fight and scrap to stay there. I think the ambitions are realistic, and I think the potential for growth is enormous. So for me, so many boxes ticked. I can only hope that we can achieve our goals.
It's been a difficult start so far, no points and no goals. What do you think is needed to turn things around?
Well, again, it would be remiss of me to start talking too much about what's needed and what needs to be turned around. I'm here for the first time today. I will start work and training tomorrow. Until such time as I had a chance really to look at the players, work with them in training, see them in matches. But I don't honestly believe there's necessarily a lot that needs to be done. You can always get off to a bad start. No one is shielded from that. And what we've got to remember, I think, is that our fate will be decided after 38 games, not 4 games. And we've got to work very hard in each game now to try and get back on track. But I'm pretty sure that my attitude and what I think will be shared by the players. I know it's shared by the hierarchy of the club. And it will be my job to make certain the players understand what we want from them.
You've had a lot of success all over the world. More recently in the Premier League, the spells at Fulham and West Brom. Is it a similar situation here with Palace, similar sized club?
I hope so, because those two clubs were really fantastic in every respect for me. I mean, the players were a real joy to work with. They really shared my beliefs and my attitudes towards football and towards becoming a successful team. The club ownership and leadership in both of those clubs was really good, very supportive. And I think that both clubs were family type clubs in the sense that the players had a sense of family, a sense of belonging. And from what I've heard about Crystal Palace, and which I'm sure is going to be proved to be the case, that's what exists here as well. So I'm very excited also to be back in club football. It's a long while since I enjoyed the day-to-day training, and back really where I most like to be, that is on the training field.
And we've got some good attacking players to work with, a couple of whom you gave England debuts to. Does that give you confidence that the team can get scoring again?
Yeah, I mean, once again, I'd rather stay away from making too many bold statements about what the team should and should not be doing until such time as I've had a better chance to see them, better chance to look at what they can and cannot do and what's realistic for them, and also to work with them on the training field. But there's no doubt that last year, at the end, the trio of Townsend, Zaha and Benteke, that was a threat, and we must try to work hard to make certain we can bring that threat back.
You brought Ray Lewington with you to the club. He's been here before in the 90s, had a long spell on the coaching staff. How do you two work as a partnership?
Well, the good thing is that from the Fulham days and then the England days, that's a 6.5-year period. We've got to know each other well, and more importantly, Ray really knows how I like to work. He knows how my practices work and how they should be, how he can help me, if you like, to get the best out of the practices. And most importantly, he's a very good coach. I mean, he's a top-class coach, really. He could easily be a top-class manager, and he's somebody that I trust, someone I know the players will like, and someone, of course, who is unbelievably diligent and honest, and someone who cares for the club. So I think he was the ideal person. I was delighted when he said he would join me.
And finally, it's been 41 years in football management for you now. What motivates you to carry on managing?
Yeah, I suppose that's a question a lot of my friends will ask, especially the ones who are sitting at home at the moment with a glass of wine and a cigar. I think what motivates me really is the field. It's working with players. It's dealing with the day-to-day problems that emerge both on the field and off the field. Being around football players, and of course, unfortunately, someone a long time ago injected the drug called football into my veins, and I've never been able to shake it off. I'm still an addict.
So there you have it. Now you've heard Roy Hodgson's first interview as Palace manager. That concludes this week's podcast reviewing the recent managerial changes. But make sure to come out next week for my post-match review of the game against Southampton. So thanks for listening, and remember to up the Palace.